What's up, everybody? Rob here. So I'm going to be doing something a little bit different right now. I'm going to be making a rating of the Kings of England on whether or not they were based or cringe. I have no idea what possessed me to do this. My job is really, really boring, and you should all be very frightened of the stuff that goes through my head at any given point. So, a couple caveats before I begin. First off, this is just the overall reputation and not every aspect of their reigns or their personalities. And more importantly, though, this is all a joke. Do not take any of this seriously here. I don't want to hear any of you in the comments going, excuse me, you missed the part where historians actually don't believe he did this, and this was actually written by his enemies way later, and it was done to discredit a previous month. Yeah, I know, it's a joke. Don't take any of this seriously. If you want to get actual information, go elsewhere. This is all just a joke. I have to put this caveat in there because people obviously don't understand how these things work. Second off, I'm going to be starting at William the Conqueror, and I'm going to be ending with the Georgians, so that would be George the Fourth. And the reason why I'm doing this is anything before William the Conqueror, there are a bunch of Saxon guys and a couple Vikings in there. You got the Danelaw, you got some guys whose names I can't even pronounce, Ethel Float or Ethel Flath or what. Look, I don't even know how to even begin. I can't even spell them, never mind how to pronounce it. No, we're starting with William because I can actually pronounce his name. And after the Georgians, and even during the Georgians, they were really nothing more than just figureheads who really had no actual power. And they're basically just glorified tourist attractions. So, yes, I said that about the British monarchy. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. You're going to do absolutely nothing about it. So, that's the time frame. And the last thing I just want to let you know before I start, this is all going to be done rapid fire. The reason why is because, well, I just don't feel like going through, I don't even know how many more. I didn't count them. But if it takes more than about 20 seconds per monarch, I'm already wasting time. And I've wasted enough time already. All right, let's get down into this. William the Conqueror, the first one. Here we go. All right, so Billy the Bastard, he made an entire nation his bitch and imposed the feudal order on the Saxons, changed the English language, changed English culture, and basically did it all by winning at the Battle of Hastings, which is a major hinge event in history. Basically, any one of 1,000 what-ifs happened during that course of the battle. All of history changes, and he came out on top. This guy's absolutely based. He's a Giga Chad. You love him. You know it. William I, based. All right, next off, his son, William II, William the Rufus. He had red hair, so that means he's a ginger, which means his soul status is in question. Now, he put down a bunch of Saxon rebellions and stabilized the kingdom after his father's death. He did fight his brother Robert for the crown, but ultimately reached a settlement with him. However, he spent way too much time partying and hunting and taxed his people way too much. He died in a hunting accident, which is a pretty bitch way to go. If you think about it, honestly, his followers can't tell the difference between him and a deer. I mean, come on. That's pretty cringe as a ruler. He's cringe. William Rufus, cringe. All right, next up, his brother, Henry I, one of William the Conqueror's sons, the only one that was actually literate, which is kind of cool, I guess, and succeeded his brother. He was meant for the church, which is why he actually knew how to read. But in any case, he ascended to the throne under very mysterious circumstances. His brother Robert was away on crusade, and Henry was also in the hunting party that killed William. He founded the Exchequer, which did streamline finances, but taxation is theft, so not really much else exciting. He did have 21 illegitimate children, but only 2 legitimate sons out of all of that, and they both drowned because he never bothered to teach them how to swim. In any case, this led to a succession crisis. Cringe. Yeah, not looking good for the House of Normandy. Next off came Stephen of Blois. First off, French name, not looking good. Second off, he broke his oath to support Henry I's daughter, Matilda, and started a rebellion against her, and couldn't defeat her in battle, split the country apart, created the anarchy. Now, he's personally very brave in battle, but he honestly got captured at the Battle of Lincoln, and he also could not secure succession for his house's line, and overall was a pretty cringe ruler. And at the same time, there was, well, Matilda, who is the only legitimate daughter of Henry I, and she managed to rally support for herself in spite of being a woman, because, women can't actually rule countries. I mean, it's 12th century people. I mean, come on. Like, you think women can do anything? Come on. She was also previously the wife of the Holy Roman Emperor, so she was called the Empress Matilda, which is kind of cool, I guess. However, she was also haughty and managed to alienate everybody, and also when there were high taxes imposed by Stephen and she would take over a territory that Stephen had controlled, she would, well, keep those taxes in place. Taxation is still theft. She's pretty cringe. However, she did give birth to the next ruler, the first Plantagenet, Henry II. Now, Henry II settled the anarchy crisis, completely reformed the legal system, set up the common law legal system that we're still using today in pretty much most of the English-speaking world, right here in the U.S., as well as in Britain, Australia, and many other places, which is really awesome. And he was the first Plantagenet, which was the longest dynasty in English history. However, he was a horrible father, had a bunch of rebellious sons, and a quarrelsome wife, but all things considered, though, he was pretty based. Next up, Richard I. Richard the Lionheart. Barely spent any time in the kingdom, therefore was a good king, because a king that is far away is a king that I like. He spent a great portion of his reign on crusade and killing a bunch of infidels, because all crusades are justified, which is based. And he also killed a bunch of French people, which is also pretty based. However, he was a terrible administrator and really didn't do much to actually run his kingdom and left it in the hands of his brother John. But overall, I give him a based rating. Next up, King John. Called King John Lackland because, well, he didn't inherit very much property, being the youngest of Henry II's sons. And also, it was known as Soft Sword, which is a very unfortunate name. Lost virtually all of English lands in France, had rebellions of the barons, and is the bad guy in pretty much every Robin Hood story. No other English king has been named John because of how cringe he was. Yeah, John, he's cringe. All right, next up came Henry III. He inherited the rebellious kingdom left by his incompetent father, King John. Never really bothered to He never really was able to control them. He taxed his subjects incessantly, which is, of course, theft, and put down the Barons' revolt, but still mismanaged the country so badly that they ended up revolting again. He was captured in battle, and overall just inherited his father's loser nature. Very cringe. All right, next up, Edward I, which is an English name. Henry's and Richard's and John's, those are all French names. Edward is an English name, which is pretty awesome. You know, he's English in England. He slaughtered a bunch of Welshmen and Scots, and the Scotch invited him in, so that's completely on them. Okay, look up the story of the true story of Braveheart, which I'm sure you've seen a billion times over. Guess what? They invited him. Okay, that's on them. He's also called the Hammer of Scots. Anytime you're named the Hammer of anything, that's pretty freaking awesome. And he also took a Crusader's oath. Overall, Edward I, based. Edward II, his son. Now, he lost much of his father's gains in Scotland and cared more for trying to impress his friend Piers Gaveston than his incredibly hot French wife. Now, he got cucked by her and her lover Roger Mortimer and may have died with a red-hot poker up his rectum. Maybe not, but the thing is, though, he is the kind of monarch that could die with a red-hot poker up his rectum, and people think, yeah, it's something that could totally happen to him. Edward II, cringe. Next up, Edward III started the 100 Years' War, killed a bunch of French people, and may have caused the birth of a more romanticized notion of chivalry. Overall, it's pretty based. Next up, Richard II did manage to put down the Peasants' Revolt, which broke out early in his career. Still, later on in his reign, he managed to alienate pretty much everybody and firmly believed in the divine right of kings, which meant he can be an absolute a-hole to everybody, and managed to piss off enough high-ranking nobility that eventually a rebellion broke out, he got captured, and was murdered by his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke. Overall, pretty cringe ruler. All right, next up you got Henry IV, Henry Bolingbroke, the guy that took out Richard II. In any case, he seized the throne, but had to deal with a bunch of rebellions, particularly amongst Welshmen, Owen Glyndwr, and all that. In any case, he had to raise taxes to put down the rebellion, so high amounts of taxes equals high amounts of theft, and this led to no real results, which led to the Long Parliament, and ultimately eroded monarchy's power. Now, normally I don't like monarchs, but at the same time, though, if you are the monarch, eroding your own power is pretty bad. So, yeah, overall, he died young, was just a complete disaster of a king. Cringe. Next up, we got Henry V. He was early in his life, was shot in the face with an arrow trying to put down a rebellion in Wales, and he didn't bitch about it. He was most famous for the English victory of the 100 Years' War at the Battle of Agincourt, killed a lot of French people with aforementioned arrows from Welsh people, and has the best Shakespeare play named after him, and also the best pre-battle speech ever. Overall, Henry V, based. Henry VI. Now, mentally unsuited for rule, and others led in his place. not a great ruler, but it really wasn't his fault. It's something that if the English monarchy was a position that one could apply for, he would never get anywhere near the job. He was little more than a figurehead for his counselors and would actually black out for months on end and left the throne more or less unoccupied. He was overthrown, reinstalled, and overthrown again, and then eventually got murdered. Being fair, he was cringe, but also being even more fair about this, it wasn't his fault. So, yeah, not really much to say there. He just really was not up to the task, and I am loath to complain about somebody who was mentally unstable like him. In any case, the guy that overthrew him and then got overthrown again back and forth was Edward IV. Now, he's tall, athletic, and highly ambitious, took the throne from the feeble-minded Henry VI, stabilized the economy as well as territory in France that was being lost because of Henry VI's, lack of ability in that area, managed to hold on to Calais, was a good warrior, a competent leader, and overall fairly effective monarch. He's based. Next came Edward V. He was a kid. He was killed by his uncle. Didn't really reign. Not much to really say there. Next up was Richard III. He killed his nephew. Don't tell me he didn't. Really, he did. I mean, he was personally courageous. He did fight in the front of the lines at the Battle of Bosworth Field. He would put himself on the line for a cause he did believe in, but he still killed a kid. Cringe. Also, he's a hunchback. Yeah, really, he was a hunchback. He had severe scoliosis, and, yeah. He killed a kid, scoliosis no. Richard III, cringe. All right, Henry VII, guy that killed the child murderer and ended the Wars of the Roses. He was also a notoriously cheap bastard and a very capable administrator, and basically sorted out the chaos created by a bunch of other people and their incompetence. I honestly understand. So honestly, Henry VII was based. All right, Henry VIII. He was a fat bastard that threw a temper tantrum because the Pope wouldn't let him tap his side piece. Look, that's exactly what happened. Don't tell me it's not exactly what happened. Cringe. All right, his son, Edward VI. Honestly, did not do very much. He died kind of young. He reigned for like 2 years, didn't really do anything. Nothing really to see here. Move along. Next up, Mary I. Bloody Mary. She killed a bunch of heretics, burned them at the stake mostly, and she also had a drink named after her. It's pretty based. Next up, her sister, or half-sister, Elizabeth I, had an entire age named after her. The golden age of English history, was a patron of Shakespeare. Would not secure an heir, though. So that's a bit of a downgrade, but overall, I'll give her a based rating. Next up, her nephew, James I, had the Bible translated into English, which is still used today, funded the exploration of the Americas, and personally, while king, oversaw the trial of at least 2 witches, which makes him super based. Also, he was Scottish. Scottish people are based. Scotland is based. James is based. Next up, his son, Charles I, spent money he didn't have, managed to piss off Parliament, and kicked off the English Civil War because of his incompetence. He got captured and executed. Charles I, cringe. All right, next up, not exactly monarchs, but you know what? I'm going to include it anyway because, I'm just going to include it anyway. Oliver Cromwell. He was a Puritan. He closed down theaters, canceled holidays, including Christmas, and basically put the entire nation on lockdown. I said it. Yeah, cringe. All right, so after he died, everybody thought, this is living in lockdown like this really sucks. Let's not do this anymore. So they called up Charles II. He restored Christmas, opened up theaters again, had a great reign. Everything was awesome. We can celebrate Christmas again. Merry effing Christmas. Charles II, based. All right, next up, his son, James II. Now, dude, be decisive. Pick a religion. He was Protestant, but then he became Catholic. And then just pick. And this is a time when this sort of thing was a pretty important decision to make. And maybe you should not piss off the vast majority of the leading nobles in your country. Maybe you should just read the room, dude. Read the room. For his complete inability to read the room, he is cringe. All right, next up you got William and Mary. Now, William and Mary, the only co-monarchs in English history, but let's be perfectly honest, it was William really running the show here. And William was Dutch, which means he's a cheap bastard, but, cheap bastards are based. They participated and actually led the Glorious Revolution, and this eventually led to the signing of the English Bill of Rights, which limited English power, guaranteed the right to bear arms only for Protestant men, but, hey, we got to start somewhere. And ultimately, though, set up the current system which we have today. Overall, William and Mary, pretty based. Next up came Queen Anne. Not really much to say about her. She didn't really rule all that much. Had a lot of miscarriages, which is very unfortunate, but she did have a pirate ship named after her, which is really based. So Queen Anne, she's based. All right, now you got George the First. He was German, did not bother learning to speak English in England. He was the King of England, never bothered to learn to speak English, which is cringe. He spoke French, which is even more cringe. And he honestly had zero interest in ruling England, turning more and more power into a position known as the Prime Minister, which is the system we have today. If you like the system you have today in Britain, any British people watching this, if you like that system, it's his fault. If you don't like this system, it's his fault. Overall, though, I'm giving him a cringe ruling. All right, next up, George II. Not really much to say here. He followed Parliament ruling the nation. He basically believed in the English Constitution as it was at the time, and was overall a fairly competent monarch. He was also the last English monarch to lead troops into battle personally, and yeah, that's pretty based right there. I mean, leading troops, personally on the field of battle, that's awesome. So overall, I'll give him a based rating. So that's him. Next up, we have George III. Now, unlike his predecessors, he actually liked being British, and he only wanted the loyalty of his subjects and did not care if they loved him or not, just their loyalty, which is understandable. He cared about the wealth, prosperity, and well-being of all of his subjects, even ones that didn't necessarily like him. And overall, I have to give him a based rating, but as an American, I just kind of have to call him pretty cringe. So I'm kind of torn on that one. I'm contractually obligated. And last stuff I'm going to be going with here is George IV. He was a fat bastard that nobody liked, and yeah, he's a fat bastard that nobody liked. So yeah, didn't really do much, but at this point, there's really not much left for him to do. And I'm going to be ending it there. He gets a cringe rating. That is it. The rest of the monarchs after this point were really nothing more than glorified figureheads. And if you say otherwise, well, you're wrong. So that's it for this video. I have no idea what possessed me to do this. And in case more videos will be coming out whenever I get around to it, have a good day or don't have a good day. Your adults have any kind of day you want. See you later.